Ever since I was a child, the only computers I ever used ran Windows. So I've tried everything from Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 7, the infamous Windows 8, and of course Windows 10. But one day, I was browsing the internet and I saw that Apple had done a major refresh to their laptops. Now instead of using Intel, they were using this thing called Apple Silicone, and the computers were just so much better. Better performance, better cooling, better battery life. Everything was just amazing. So I thought to myself, hey, my next computer is gonna be a Mac. So here we are, 1 year later, and here's everything that I like, dislike, and kind of when it comes to macOS. So the first thing about the MacBook that shocked me, almost made me want to return the device. So just as I was setting it up, I went downstairs and placed the thing on a desk. Then I started to notice something odd. The MacBook didn't sit flat with the desk. It just kept wobbling and only sat on like 3 legs. I started to think that maybe my MacBook was deformed and started asking if other people had like messed up MacBooks. Everyone just said no. So as I was sitting there confused, ready to return this MacBook, I picked it up and placed it on a different desk in another room, and suddenly it was just flat, like nothing happened. So that's when I realized, first of all, that the MacBook is so stiff that if you place it on an uneven desk, it won't even sit flat. Because my other laptops would just flex a little and it'd be flat. Thankfully, it's not actually a problem with the computer itself. Now, since this is also my first premium computer, it's the first one I've had where the outside is made of metal. So it was very weird getting used to having a computer that is very cold. Normally, most computers are just really hot, but this MacBook, for some reason, in the winter, always felt cold to touch and was kind of annoying in winter. Now, because I don't have all the money in the world, I had to choose between having more RAM or more storage. So the computer I went for was the MacBook Air with 8 gigs of RAM and half a terabyte of storage. I just went for the extra storage, so I went for half a terabyte. Here in South Africa, that's the most storage you can get for the MacBook Air. And when it comes to comparing 8 gigabytes of RAM on a MacBook compared to 8 gigs of RAM on a Windows computer, 8 gigs just goes much further on an Apple laptop. Like honestly, at times it just felt like I had like 10 or 12 gigs of RAM instead of just 8, thanks to the fact that the MacBook will always use swap memory, like a lot. In fact, in some cases, it would go as high as like 10 gigabytes of swap. When I have like multiple Chrome tabs open, each with its own YouTube video, and I'm editing a video on Final Cut Pro at the same time, that's when the swap would go really high. In fact, sometimes it would go so high, the computer would tell me to close some apps because I was running out of storage. So if you're looking to get that new MacBook Pro with like only 8 gigs of RAM, it shouldn't be that bad. But honestly, if you do lots of intense work, I would still recommend upgrading the RAM. But you won't really have many problems, even if you leave apps open all the time. One thing I don't like about Apple is that they force you to spend more money to get less features. Now, of course, I'm really kind of used to that since I had an iPad, but even after the first time, it never gets any better, knowing just how much money Apple is taking. So in this case, when I was looking at other Windows options at the same price point, you could get a touchscreen computer where you can have a stylus you can use to handwrite your notes or to draw art or whatever. So if you're like someone who knows you're going to be doing lots of notes taking, then maybe instead of having to get both a MacBook and an iPad, which is very expensive, you could just get that one computer that does both. Or when it comes to GPU performance, for the same price as this MacBook, you could get a gaming laptop which gets much better performance and can run like emulators at higher frames per second. Because after all, the Mac doesn't really have many games, so it's mostly emulators that I play. And while it can run at 4K, if I had a gaming PC, it would run even better. So if you're looking for some very specific features, then MacBook might not really be your best or first choice, because there are some better options if you don't need macOS. Like let's say you don't own an iPad, you don't own an iPhone, then I think in this case, Windows will always give you more bang for buck when it comes to features. Now, another thing that was annoying when I first got the MacBook has to be Finder. So Finder is basically Apple's version of File Explorer. And one thing I found odd is that with Windows, it always put everything into like grids. But on macOS, it just is freeform. You can put files and folders anywhere you want to on the screen. So at first, it was kind of annoying because everything just felt so messy. But after a while, I got used to it. There's this feature you can use called Clean Up, which allows you to organize everything almost like you're on Windows. If you hate the disorganization, you can like use that. It's also kind of funny how not only can you be disorganized in real life, but now you can even be disorganized organized on your desktop. Now, this is not an Apple product unless there's some stupid BS that you have to deal with. And in this case, macOS does not have an audio mixer. So, for those who don't know, an audio mixer is basically a feature that allows you to control the volume of individual apps. So for example, let's say you're playing a game, but you want to listen to music at the same time. With an audio mixer, you can, for example, turn down the volume of the game and then turn up the music so that you can hear the music, but still hear a bit of the game in the background. But with macOS, that feature does not exist. The game will play at the same level all the time. So it's kind of annoying. Apple, just put an audio mixer in there. It's like not that difficult. Windows has it. My freaking Samsung phone has it. It's not that hard. So let's talk about things that I love about macOS or just Apple computers. First of all is the integration with the Apple ecosystem. So if you own an iPad, an iPhone, whatever, the Apple ecosystem thing just works so great. Right now, I only have an iPad and the laptop, of course. So it's not like I can do anything, but the things I can do are honestly really cool. For example, if I want to scan a document, I can literally open a Finder window, click on Scan Document, and then it literally open my camera on my iPad so I can scan the documents and it'll automatically send them over to my computer, which is pretty cool. You also get AirDrop. So now if I want to, I can have a file on my iPad, easily AirDrop that to my computer. Then when it comes to notes, one of my favorite features is Quick Notes. So I'll slide up from the corner of the screen on my iPad, it'll open up a Quick Notes window, I can type a quick note over there, close it, and then just a couple of seconds later when I open up my laptop, those Quick Note has already synced up. But then of course, there is Sidecar. I could take my iPad and then turn it into a wireless second monitor for my MacBook. So if I'm outside the house, I can easily use this thing as a second monitor and keep up my productivity if I have to keep multiple apps open at the same time. It's actually really good. It is a bit buggy because sometimes it'll disconnect, especially if you live in a place like an apartment where there's lots of like Wi-Fi networks all around. There it can be a bit unstable, but when it works, it's honestly really good. Now, another thing that took me a while to get used to is the trackpad. So if you look at Windows computers, they have a trackpad, then they have three buttons. You have a left click, you have a right click. With Lenovo computers, I know you can get a middle click. But with MacBook, there are no buttons. It's just a trackpad, and the trackpad is also just one big button. So what Apple does is they have a vibration motor like underneath the trackpad, and anytime you push down on the trackpad, basically it uses a vibration to make it feel like you're clicking on a trackpad. And honestly, if I didn't know that, I wouldn't be able to tell. Like, it's very good. Apple has also included a force sensing thing, like, you know how iPhones used to have 3D touch? This thing, the trackpad, also has some sort of like 3D touch kind of thing. That means that you have this thing called a force click. So one click will be like a normal left click on a computer, but if you push harder, you get a force click. And this usually unlocks like extra features. One of my favorite features of this is the dictionary. So you hover your mouse over a word, you force click on it, and it automatically brings up a dictionary definition. Like, the amount of times I've used this is crazy. Like, it's honestly really nice. Normally, I'd have to open up Chrome, start a new tab, and then type define this word, then click enter and get a definition. But with this, I just hover over the word, force click, and I get the definition. It's honestly a really nice time saver. I don't know if I could live without it. Now, this force detection thing has some other features. For example, if you're using a photo editor like Affinity Photo, depending on how hard you press, the brush will either be a very light stroke or a very hard one, almost like real life. If I'm being honest, it's not really that good. The Apple Pencil does it so much better, but it's cool to have that feature. Now, one thing I found really cool as well is that because it doesn't actually use a physical mechanism for the trackpad, when you click, you can actually adjust how hard you have to click to get a mouse click. So you can make it either very light or very hard, which is pretty cool. The first couple of times I loved messing around with it, but these days I just don't really care. But it's cool to have. Also, when it comes to right clicking, since there is no button, you have to use 2 fingers to push down. The first couple of times it was kind of annoying, but honestly these days it's actually not an issue. In fact, in most cases, I find myself just hovering over something and then using a control click. So if you hold down the control button and then click, it basically acts like a right click, and I use that a lot actually. So I don't really miss the buttons because Apple does it so well. So once you get used to it, it's really good. There are 2 things I want to talk about. The first thing is this laptop is so cool. Like, when I first heard that this MacBook Air does not have a fan, I was a bit worried because every other computer I've used has a fan and runs super hot. Sometimes hot enough to like feel like it's burning your hand. But with a MacBook, even though it has no fan, it runs surprisingly cool. So if you're doing some light tasks, you can actually put this on your lap and not feel like your legs are burning, which I really like. In normal day-to-day use, if you're a power user like me with multiple apps open, the computer does get pretty warm and that coolness isn't so cool anymore. So this computer does still get very hot. So if you're someone who is actually gonna put this computer on your lap, I would still recommend getting like the MacBook Pro, so at least you get the fan so it runs much cooler. In fact, sometimes when I run games or very intense programs, the computer runs very hot and ends up thermal throttling. Then I find myself having to like take the laptop, and place like a blanket underneath to cool it down. I move it to somewhere else where it's cooler again just to make sure it cools down, and it's kind of annoying. It's not necessary, but I don't want my computer to lose performance. So if you know you're going to do intense work, just get the MacBook Pros. Now let's talk about the hinge. The hinge is the thing that keeps the screen open. And with previous laptops that I've used, which obviously weren't fancy ones, if you held the screen at an almost closed position, it would just slowly slide down until it closes the lid. But with the MacBook, this hinge is like solid. Pretty much hold the screen at any angle and it will stay in that position, even in like an almost closed position. So that means that when it comes to comfort when using the screen, you can always get the perfect angle. Because normally with my other laptops, I pretty much have to keep it at like an almost 90-degree angle. But since the MacBook has a really solid hinge, you can hold it at almost any position and it stays there, which is great for comfort. Now one thing I really like about the Mac is when an app freezes. Not necessarily app freezing, but I like how easy it is for you to just close the app after it freezes. Because with a Windows laptop, normally you'd have to like open up Task Manager, find the frozen app, click on Stop App. But here with macOS, if an app freezes, you just come over to the menu bar, find the app, right click, force quit. Very simple. I love it. I use this all the time. Something else I find also really interesting is how easy it is to install apps. Normally with Windows, you double click an install file, it says where do you want to install it, you click OK, it's like what do you want to install, you click this, that, and etc until you're done, which is like a multi-step process. But with Mac, you download the app, double click the app file, drag the app icon into the folder, boom. That's actually very easy and I really like it. It's so simple. Even when it comes to uninstalling apps, you find the app, you drag it to the bin, it's gone. Except there's like a hidden issue, which is that it only deletes the app file. So when deleting apps on Mac, you delete the app, but then you also have to go into the folders and clean up all the leftover files, which is kind of annoying. Since we're here, let's talk about the things I don't like about macOS. When you activate the option to hide the dock, every time you come over to the dock and it like comes back up, it takes way too long to do. In fact, it took so long it annoyed me. So I went to Google, I was like, how to speed up the dock animation. And there's like a special script you can run to speed up the animation so that it's not like annoying. So if you like hiding a dock, make sure to Google that thing and like run the script, because without it, it just takes too long. My next complaint is just like a general Apple complaint. If you've used almost any other Apple device, you'll understand where I'm coming from. It's the cable. I don't know why, but out of all cables I've ever used in my entire life, the Apple cable just attracts dirt. First time it looks really nice and clean, but then it just absorbs dust until it starts looking brown. Like if I wipe the thing, it's like such a big difference between clean and dirty. I don't know what kind of materials they use for these charging cables because wow, it sucks. Now as a gamer, macOS is horrible because while I can run emulators, right? There's PPSPP, there's a PS2 emulator, some other ones, which is nice. The M1 runs them very nicely. But when it comes to like actual PC games, right now it's very sparse. Like in terms of new games, there's Death Stranding, there's Resident Evil, but like the App Store has like no other games that are actually Windows level quality. So you're pretty much stuck playing like some iPad apps. When it comes to backwards compatibility, macOS is also really bad. Because like if you use Windows, sometimes when I play old games, it's actually pretty easy to do that. But with like Mac, if you try playing an old game on an old app, it just tells you no, you can't do that. So if you're a gamer, I'd honestly consider how badly do you want to use macOS, because missing out on games kind of sucks. Or, I mean, if you're buying a MacBook, you could always just buy like a console alongside, like get yourself an Xbox Series S or a Steam Deck to play all your games, because the MacBook does not play games. Another thing I don't like, specifically about the M1 MacBook Air, is the webcam. For the amount of money I'm paying, I was expecting something really good, like maybe almost looking like an iPhone selfie camera, but instead, it just looks horrible. Especially since like in this modern era, almost everyone will be doing like some form of like virtual calls, like Zoom or whatever. Having a good camera matters a lot. When you look at iPhones and iPads, you can uninstall almost every app and just be left with like the basics, the essentials, like, you know, settings and camera. The thing that should be more free, like they don't actually let you uninstall apps. Like I don't know why. For example, there's this app called Apple TV. It takes up like a couple 100 megabytes, but if I want to uninstall it, you can't do that. There's literally no way to do that. Like I'll never pay for Apple TV. You can uninstall it on iPad and iPhone, but like for some reason it's stuck there on Mac, which I don't understand. The next thing that makes no sense to me is Microsoft Office, because if you've used it on Windows, it works fine. If you try the iPad version, it kinda sucks, or just really sucks actually. But when you look at the Mac version, you'd think Microsoft Office would be really good. For some reason, it's missing a bunch of features. So when I was completing my assignments for school, I couldn't actually complete them because some features were just straight up missing on Mac. So I had to get like a Windows computer or run like a virtual machine to get access to those full features. You also don't get keyboard shortcuts on Office, so if you're someone who likes to work very fast, just know that you're gonna have to get used to working a lot slower on Mac. Make sure that all the apps that you use are actually available. So honestly, after 1 year, I can see that macOS and Windows honestly aren't that different to each other. It's actually very similar. It's just a few things here and there that are very different, and usually it's Apple being worse, except for the Apple ecosystem. If you have Apple devices, then Mac is great, but otherwise, I don't really think it's worth switching, especially with the extra cost.